start then. Okay, let's start then. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this technical lecture organized by Society of Petroleum Engineer Ghana section in joint with Tunis section. Today's meeting will be about resilient supply chain and enabler for Africa oil and gas industry. I'm Ahmed Shebbi. I will be the moderator for this session. So without taking more time, I think I will just outline the program and then give the word to Sheena. So our program will start with the welcome address by SPE Ghana section chair Sheena. Then we will be introducing the theme and the speaker, Mrs. Salah. Then we will give the word to Mrs. Salah to present the subject. Then we will have a session of questions and answer, just to better understand the topic. So, Sheena, the floor is yours for the welcome address.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ahmed, and thank you to everyone, especially the Tunis section, for having this collaboration with us. I hope this will be the first of many collaborations to come, and this is a good topic that we would learn from, because supply chain is something that affects everything that we do within the industry. And so we're looking forward to this section, and I hope we'll all pick good lessons from this as we go along. And thank you, Salah, for agreeing to speak to us on this as well. Thank you, Ahmed, and thank you, everyone. Over to you, Ahmed.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you for your welcome. So today's topic, as said, will be the resilient supply chain and enabler for oil and gas industry. We will have with us Mrs. Salah. That's how I call her. Salah has an impressive career, an impressive journey. Salah has over 20 years experience in managing supply chain across industries. She is an APIX certified supply chain professional and hold an MBA and Bachelor in Business Management, Bachelor in Law, and over 15 years of supply chain experience in oil and gas operation. Result-oriented, team leader, team player, a negotiator with the ability to communicate at all levels. She is an international business professional with the ability to manage dynamic markets, leading global team and businesses. She is a versatile leader, experienced in oil and gas supply chain across regions. She is currently the Global Director of Procurement and Sourcing for the Completion and Well Intervention segment of Baker Hughes. Prior to her current role, she was the Supply Chain Director of Baker Hughes Africa region, but also served as Country Director for Ghana and Ivory Coast for Baker Hughes. In her previous roles in Africa, she led the growth and development of a team of supply chain professionals in the Africa region. She is a very active member of the Employee Resources Group for Diversity and Minority Group in Baker Hughes, and a recent graduate of the GE Crantonville Female Leadership Program. In 2023, she was selected into the 23-24 Women Leaders Global Procurement Cohort. In her career, she has developed expertise in building business synergies, supplier development, building supply chain strategy for global business and new markets. She is a mentor with a passion for growing and developing talents. Salah is also a mother of 3 young teenagers whom she loves to play with, and she does not miss a chance to go jogging whenever possible. Thank you, Salah, for being with us today. Join me all to welcome Salah. And I think without giving more time, the floor is yours, Salah.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thanks, Sheena. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak to petroleum engineers. You people in this society are a group of professionals that we all admire. Most of my people I've worked with, most of my career that I've come across different engineers in oil and gas. And I think everybody is proud to be a member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. So you guys are doing a good job and trying to build that knowledge base of professionals that you network and connect together. To see that the Ghana team is so active in LinkedIn, Facebook. I follow you guys. I see what you do. And now you are networking with Tunisia and other countries. It's great. Great job, guys. And glad to be part of this group. I'm not an engineer. I won't attempt to quote any engineering terms today. So, but if I do so, please just know that my husband is an engineer. So sometimes I try to speak like an engineer, though I'm not one of them. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk supply chain. And you may be asking yourself, why supply chain? As engineers and as business leaders, supply chain is one of those important subject areas that can either make or break your business, right? So feel free to interact, ask questions. I will reserve a lot of time towards the end of the presentation so that we can engage. It's all about us talking and understanding and clarifying some of the areas that you may have questions. I do not know it all. Any questions that you have that I don't have the answers, I'm happy to research with my network and give you feedback. So feel free to ask as many questions as you can. So I'm trying to get some technology out here first. Sorry if I'm jumping around my screen. So the abstract for this presentation and the topic is supply chain, resilient supply chain, and enabler of Africa's oil and gas industry. And we selected a topic, Africa oil and gas industry, because in this group are supply chain professionals, oil and gas professionals, energy professionals, and we all find ourselves in the oil and gas industry, of which it's a very big growing industry in Africa. So the abstract for this is that we see the oil and gas industry in Africa growing at a very rapid pace. We are discovering reserves in most of the countries that hadn't been known for oil and gas. And we see supply chain as one of those enablers that can really accelerate the growth of the industry to where we want it to be. So in this presentation today, I'm going to look at some of the strategies such as supplier diversification, strategic stockpiling, risk management, technology integration and cooperation as some of those enablers that we'll be looking to leverage so that our continent oil and gas reserves can be available to the society where we are, the communities, as well as to the global market. So this is the abstract to this presentation, and I will cover the rest of these talking topics in the following pages. So the introduction, right? We do know that our continent is entering a new phase in our oil and gas market. Demand for the continent oil and gas resources is in the increase. And as you can see in the following slide, you realize that as a continent, we lead in the consumption of our commodities. Though today we are not known to be the biggest producers, but as a growing continent, this is one of the key resources that Africa will require in our growth. So majority of African countries today are dependent on import of oil and gas product and resources back to the continent for consumption and for growth. And for the companies that are participating in this industry, we see an opportunity to localize production, consumption in the country versus what we do today. So in the next chapter, you realize that the research out there indicate that from now till 2030, Africa's natural consumption just by population, by growth in the countries, will increase by almost 20% versus the global increase of about 10% for just energy products and services. So this tells anybody who's listening to us today, who understand the African market, that Africa is the place to be, is the place for growth. And as all people in the industry, what we need to do is to make sure that this growth is successful, such that our continent can get the needed resources that we need in the oil and gas space for growth and for development. So in the next slide here, you will see that the international oil companies that are all coming to Africa today in either Central Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, are looking for opportunities to develop projects much faster than we have done. when I started my career in Ghana, when we had Jubilee fields, from when discoveries was made to when first oil was made was a span of about 3 to 4 years. Today, we are seeing very shortened from discovery to first oil, much faster to market than you can expect, all because of one, stable economic global prices for oil and gas products, and also increase in demand across the global spectrum for oil and gas products. So as an African continent, we find ourselves in the best position today to be able to leverage our resources, our network, to produce and consume, first of all, in the continent, and then secondly, to serve the rest of the world. And we all know the geopolitical crisis in Europe today. With Ukraine war, there is much demand for energy because Russia isn't as allowed to produce and sell in Europe as it was in the past. So today, Europe in particular is looking at alternative sources to have natural gas, to have crude available in their countries for consumption. So where else to look out for than Africa? We have the best network in terms of logistics and access to European market. So we are being looked in as a region that can help the current energy crisis in Europe. So I do say that with the growth that we see, Africa, as you can see in this slide, is looking to consume at least 30% more in terms of its energy needs by the year 2040 versus the rest of the world at 10%. So this is what you call opportunity, right? Anybody looking to Africa today see a double growth opportunity for it, either as a company, as a supplier, as even we people, nationals of the continent, see this opportunity as well. And the ask is, this need to translate into one, development in the continent, employment in the continent, infrastructure growth in the continent, because why grow at a higher digit if that doesn't translate into fiscal evidence of growth, right? So these dynamics both will give us concerns that we need to address, right? Because you look at the continent, you need to look at what can we do differently around our energy policy. How are leaders going to rethink what we do differently? Are we going to continue to produce crude and export it out and import refined products, or are we going to invest in infrastructure that we can refine this locally, both as a way of reducing costs and also creating jobs and developing our continent? So one of the statements I made here is that what we need to do is that the nations that are in this oil and gas producing enclave or group need to look at financial pools to enable us produce and consume our products locally, because the market is there. We're gonna grow 30% more higher than the rest of the world. So this is like the biggest opportunity that exists today for Africa. And this report is courtesy McKinsey and Company, and they are into global research in consumption of global commodities and products like crude and then natural gas. So the role of supply chain. Here the topic is about supply chain. I gave an introduction looking at what is happening in the continent. Then the question is, what does supply chain need to do to make this a reality? So for us to achieve the needed leverage that will help Africa's growth, supply chain needs to be seen as an enabler. Supply chain is one of those functioning in every company today. And when you look at supply chain, all we need to do is bring supply to meet demand. That is what we do in supply chain. So all the processes that get you from when a country discovers a natural resource to when we get a rig into country to drill, to exploit whatever we do and get the product out to where the demand is supply chain functions and processes. So we need an enabled supply chain that will facilitate the flow of resources for ease and smooth operation of the industry and minimize the disruptions. What have we seen in terms of the disruption in Africa? Those of us in the call, most of us will be very aware of some of the projects that in the last couple of years have either struggled or have been delayed because of supply chain disruption. We know COVID came and played a role in everything supply chain, but they were just also systemic and process delays and access to resource delays that delayed most of the projects that we see today in Africa. Top on our mind, you think of Total Telenga, $5 billion project, delayed consistently for over 6 years because of access to one, supply chain assets and products to get the project going, we all heard and we are all aware of Chevron Cabinda. That project keep delaying year on year until it came on stream late part of 2022, but not even a full scope of that project is actually on stream today. And many more similar examples. We had, and I think we all follow the news of the Total LNG project in Mozambique that continuously have been delayed because of all the surrounding challenges, including supply chain challenges. So I think any international oil company coming to Africa come with that mind that, listen, it's gonna be challenging and maybe almost impossible in some cases, but the continent need to present supply chain as an enabler, but not as a disadvantage to anybody looking to invest and grow in that in African continent. So one of the areas as well I want to look at what we need to do differently is we need to look at developing our suppliers, because today when I run supply chain in Africa, over 90% of my suppliers sat outside of the African continent. I need to import almost everything into the region to be able to run the business. What African businesses need to do is to look at developing locally and partnering with global companies such that they can produce or supply those products locally in Africa. So supplier growth and diversification is so important for us as an enabler for the African oil and gas industry. Also, the ability of supply chain companies and functions to act and react to constant market changes. Things are going to happen in Africa. We're going to go into coups that happen quite some cases. There's going to be currency crisis. There's going to be what you call strikes in some of the countries. Some of these are frightening to anybody in supply chain, because if you plan a project, you do plan in some risk, but like the risk level in Africa becomes so unknown sometimes that any supply chain professional need to be extra reactive to be able to survive in that market. But that doesn't still make it impossible, because with the right kind of local knowledge, local resources, local content, you're able to understand how each country is unique in Africa and what you need to put in as your enablers in those countries to just support your growth. So one area that we also need to look at as well is the ability to maximize the growth and be agile, because this is a continent that is on a growth. So you need to be able to operate in an agile manner such that you can have limited asset on ground because you've outsourced most of your resources to local suppliers in particular, and also local businesses. So international companies that are coming to Africa today are looking at not landing all the assets owned by themselves, but outsourcing and driving local participation where they have JV partners, local strategic alliances, what we call in some cases subcontractors, just so that one, you are very agile in your setup and you are de-risking the investment across multiple players. So that is also one opportunity for supply chain to just make sure that these players are well aware, they are well prepared, and they invest in the right set of equipment, assets, and people, such that when these IOCs are arriving in Africa, these partnerships are already there that they can easily plug in and then have a partnership to go on with their project. So some of the strategic resilience that any company looking to grow in the African space will include alignment. I talked of alignment earlier because today, if you want to be the one who bring in the rig, have in the tools, have in the engineers on board, have in the facility back onshore, offshore, that alone is extensive cost. And companies are looking at who else can own the rig, who else can own the personnel, who else can own the equipment. So that level of subcontracting and de-risking across multiple players is what you need to do in your alignment for culture, for technology, just making sure that various stakeholders are coming together to make your project a success. Visibility. Today, like I used to be in groups and meetings that people say, I don't understand what is happening in that country. It's true, because the information you get about the country, what you read in the paper or what you are told by your business, what do you call it, entry strategies, is normally different from what you actually see on ground when you arrive. So accurate, on-time, real information are very important for the success of anybody in the Africa supply chain space. You need to be able to understand the local dynamics of the countries you operate, the cultural dynamics of the country you operate, because the import loss alone of Congo, Brazzaville is totally different from Gabon, but they are all in the Central Africa enclave. So understanding these unique differences will make any supply chain function in the business an enabler than always being quote unquote the problem, because we cannot import, we cannot export because we don't understand the laws. I talked of agility earlier on. It's important to diversify. Owning everything is great. You keep the profit, you keep the business to yourself, but you take the entire risks that come with the business as well. So having partners and operating as lean as you can and keeping the lowest level of not necessarily investment, but the lowest level of assets where possible, and outsourcing as much as you can will reduce any risk should the industry takes up or takes down at any point in time. And we know in our industry, down 10, up 10 is just the usual way that this industry operates. And then finally, collaborations. We need to collaborate. Suppliers in the African continent need to collaborate and partner across countries, across regions, and globally. Like I said earlier on, for any supplier looking to invest in the continent, you need to be able to identify global brands or global companies that you want to image and be a representative, a licensee, a channel in country, so that the IOCs can look at you locally in that country as being capable with the right global support or technology support to deliver the needed resource. Like I said earlier on, when I operated in Africa, I imported over 90% of what I needed for every project in that region. That is difficult for any supply chain professional, because if you need to depend on importing everything you need, you are only at the mercy of time. Lead time becomes more longer, risk is very high, and that can definitely and always in some cases lead to projects being delayed. So these strategies are important, having the right alignment with your local strategies, what you need to do to be in country, who are your partners, who are your stakeholders, having the level of visibility, understand it, don't make assumptions. People assume that Africa is one country, Africa is one region. Africa is different regions. Africa is multiple countries. Each country is unique. The challenges from countries differ from one to another. So understanding the right level of information in each country is so important to having a successful supply chain function. Being agile, make sure that you can diversify the risk as much as you can to the various stakeholders and be able to rapidly respond to changing market needs and conditions. And most importantly, collaborate, work with stakeholders, make sure that you have somebody. You can't own it all and you can't know it all. Have people that own tiers of the business, tiers of the technology, tiers of the system, such that you are growing, you are getting mentoring, you are getting technology support, technical training and all that to deliver the best quality products and services, to build that confidence in the continent. Today, what we say is we worry to procure some type of product in the region. You ask yourself, would they have the right qualification, the right certification, the right technical knowledge? If something goes wrong, do they have the backup? But if you set up a good collaboration with, let's say, original equipment manufacturers, or right, OEMs, you set up the right technical visibility of your people, they are trained and certified by global certification companies. It builds the confidence of the companies around you that yes, this local company can deliver the services. And if something goes wrong, they have the backup of this global brand or this global knowledge to help them out. So these are the strategies that I recommend in being resilient. Definitely, we have challenges. It's not only Africa, the industry overall have challenges. So in the coming years, the industry is going to continue to grow, but the challenge that faces Africa, and just like any other continent, Latin America, Asia, Middle East, is the energy transition. There is like a deliberate or an important move for everybody's good to move away from fossil fuel to more cleaner and more greener energy. Every company today, every international oil company today is deliberate on what they put in and where they invest when it comes to green energy, because one, we are all committed to a safer world and everybody wants to make sure that they play their role. So African countries that are so dependent, the economy is so dependent on oil and gas revenue, oil and gas output and incomes, are going to struggle in the coming years, because as we transition out to more greener energy, then the raw fossil fuel business, it's going to be a challenge. Is fossil fuel going to disappear in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Maybe no, absolutely. Energy demand is going to increase. But how will Africa position itself to make it more cleaner, more greener, so that we can continue to attract the right international oil companies to invest in Africa? We all read recently of Shell exiting Nigeria, SPCD, finally exiting Nigeria and selling to a local stakeholder, because everybody wants to count their impact, right? We are all counting our carbon footprint and just making sure that wherever we invest in according to our green goals or our green KPIs, and making sure that we are not derailing our progress. So this, for me, is a very big challenge coming up in the future. And how does supply chain come in? Supply chain need to come in and be the resilient function that helps this transition by making sure that what are the new green technologies that we need to deploy into Africa? How do we make those technologies from demand to supply connect in the African continent, that even if we have local players, international companies are leaving the continent or leaving some of the countries, that the local players do not do something onward to green energy transition, but that they are investing in more modern, acceptable extraction and exploration or drilling production systems that meets the goal or the parameters of green energy. So that's, for me, is a challenge. And then infrastructure today, and I was talking to a friend, I was mentioning that when I participated in Total Tilinga project, one of the biggest challenge was how do we get crude flow in from Uganda, from the northern part of Uganda through Tanzania into Kenya, all the way to the port of Mombasa and export it out. So that infrastructure today doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in most African countries, and that alone is a challenge for us. We literally have no big refineries. My country, Ghana, doesn't really have a national oil refinery until the new investment from the Chinese companies. The point is, how long will this take? Because we are producing, we expect to consume. There is almost like a triple demand coming up in the next 10 to 15 years. How is Africa positioning in terms of infrastructure development to make sure that we can extract, we can refine, and we can consume in the country? Because that is how we add value. That is how we grow local companies. That is how we create jobs for the youth in the continent. So navigating this complex, we'll call it infrastructure requirement for the African continent, is, for me, one of the most important challenge that is in front of us. But definitely with an enabled supply chain, we should be able to attract investors that can build pipelines, build refineries, build systems that will bring raw products to finished products so that the African continent can consume and be in position to export finished product instead of exporting raw material today. And then finally, the environment, right? Our environment is ours. The continent belongs to Africans. We need to make sure that whatever we do in extracting, refining, are done safely and in alignment with what green energy is all about, and making sure that our communities do not in the future suffer for our footprint or for whatever we do. We need to make sure that we are deploying the right technology, the best-in-class environmental systems to protect our community, because at the end of the day, we have one earth, we have one continent, and we have one region. So let's make sure that we are delivering a cleaner, safer operation wherever we are. And for supply chain, making sure that we make available the right technology, the right equipment, the right systems available, that companies that are looking to do the right thing in the environment can source locally this equipment, these services, to run a safe, clean processes in their operation, so that we don't end up polluting, diluting some of our progress that we've made in the community so far. We do know the usual stories around what some companies did in some of the fields out in West Africa, just making sure that whatever we do as an energy industry, we don't leave footprints that impact our agriculture industry, our just usual communities where we live, farms and all that. So that is also one key area that any supply chain professional should be thinking. What strategies am I deploying into my business to make sure that when I'm sourcing, am I sourcing it ethically? Am I employing the right equipment, the right investment around suppliers, and giving them the right KPIs just to make sure that my suppliers are not undercutting, damaging the community just to serve my company. So that for me is a challenge that is worth reflecting by anybody, because at the end of the day, we need a safer world, a safer Africa to continue running oil and gas operations. So my recommendations is that given the evolving landscape of oil and gas industry in Africa and the challenges that is posed by the global energy transition, we need to prioritize our strategic investment. And by doing so, we need to build resilient and flexible supply chain to be the enabler that will focus on growing indigenous local suppliers and businesses in Africa to be positioned to deliver the needed technology, services, equipment, whatever, to make the industry continue to grow and develop. Supplier collaboration, diversification, stockpiling, and technology, cross-learning and trainings are very important, that we make these processes available to the continent suppliers and people. And then additionally, we need to place emphasis on our environment. I'm passionate about the environment because I believe that the world, we just have one earth, right? Every supplier that is participating in this space, or every business that is participating in this place, ask yourself, how ethical is my supply chain? Am I investing in the right suppliers? Am I training my suppliers to know the do's and the don'ts when it comes to the environment? How am I investing in growing awareness, knowledge around doing the right thing for greener energy? So for me, that's also very important. So sustaining oil and gas operation in the continent all depend on how proactively we are addressing and navigating these uncertainties, and just making sure that we are investing in the right places. For me, that is investing in greener energy and making sure that whatever we are transitioning out in the rest of the world is not accepted in Africa because, quote unquote, we are in Africa. We need the same world-class standard as anywhere else in the world. My conclusions. So our industry has a lot of potential. I'm excited of what the future looks like for the industry in Africa. And we can do so if we deliberately shift our thinking, our approach to sustainability. And to do so, ensuring that wherever we sit in the decision-making table, we are empowering the thought process around enabling the supply chain function such that we are sourcing ethically, we are procuring what is the right thing, we are empowering and easing the challenges that we see in the continent to run business such that anybody who look to invest in Africa will have the same excitement and priority, just like investing in any other region in the world. So some of the challenges that we see that around energy transition, the geopolitical uncertainties are here, but the fact is that we can counter these challenges by having a proactive, collaborative, and a network of systems and processes that enable the continent to position itself to be resilient and deliver what we need in each of these countries. So for me, resilient supply chain looks to be the solution, because wherever you sit, if you discover a resource, all the equipment you need, all the people you need to bring on board, all those processes come through one supply chain function or another from end to end, right? So to enable your business, just make sure or consider the fact that getting your supply chain on wheels with the right investment, the right knowledge, the right expertise is how you can bring your project from a good start to a good end without delays. So I see this resilient supply chain as the strategy, such as supplier diversification, stockpiling that I talked earlier on, and technology integration has been a key focal point for us as a region to grow both locally in Africa, internationally by exporting, and just also reduce the complexity that the industry sees today in some of the African continent. So these are my conclusions around what we need to do, and also just looking at the fact that locally there is just a lot of potential in the African continent and a lot more to discover in this continent. Thank you so much. Merci, Sukram, and I appreciate that you guys have been listening to me all this time. Thanks for the collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Salah. It was a very interesting presentation. I invite the audience to ask any question they may have, either directly or posing them in the chat. And so I will start myself. So Salah, to my understanding, in Africa, we have the need, and not only we, but the world is now needing more and more energy. They look to diversify their energy source, either for strategic reason or because they are forced to due to several conflicts and war and a lot of problem around the world. So we have the need, we have the reserves. I mean, the African soil is very rich, either with fossil energy or any other of minerals, etc. We have the potential. So if we want to summarize, what should we do if we want to summarize? I know that you went through this point, but just to have some takeaway information, let's say, what should we do? We have the most difficult thing we have the market, we have the product. So we just need some addition points. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so good question, and good what do you call it, look into what we need to do. So as a supply chain professional, we need to connect demand to supply, right? And how do we do that? We need to make sure that we already have the natural resources and we have the demand. So there is a natural resource that need to go through the processes to be what everybody is looking out for, refined products, right? So we need to invest in the infrastructure systems in Africa to, one, be able to refine our product locally within Africa, consume what we need. And we are the continent with the biggest need of this, what do you call it, energy, or what do you call oil and gas product. So we are the continent with the biggest need. We don't need to look out to the rest of the world to refine their product or buy the raw material from us, refine it, create the jobs in their continent, and send us back the finished product. So in that way, Africa is literally serving the rest of the world. We are working for the rest of the world. We extract, we have the natural resources. We've been blessed with the natural resources in our land. We extract it, send it away to other continents for them to refine, extract all the benefit that there comes with it, and then just sell us the finished product. So what we need to do is to make sure that we are able to have an end-to-end supply chain from extracting the raw material, processing it to what we need as a continent, consuming it, connecting demand to supply, and whatever is the excess that is left, we can export that one to the rest of the world. By doing so, we would have been developing the infrastructure systems of our countries, building refineries, creating jobs, and everybody knows when you take crude, the byproducts of crude, when you extract, whether you extract diesel, petrol, whatever the byproduct is enormous. You can use it for literally dozens of other products. So all of those opportunities sit in Africa, right? Sit in Africa if we start to have an end-to-end process where we extract, refine, consume, and then export finished product. So Ahmed, I think that's the way. That's what we need to do. And that's how we need to rethink how oil and gas activities are happening in Africa today.
Okay. So we have a question from Christabel. So she's thanking you for the presentation. So in your current assessment of Africa oil and gas industry, what is the ease of market entry into supply chain for new players, and which part of the supply chain is most fragile and require the most attention for innovative opportunities?
Yeah, thank you, Christabel. So let me start with the most fragile part of supply chain. Today, I will look at planning, right? So planning as one of the functions or sub-functions of supply chain is one of the riskiest in Africa, right? Because you plan with global parameters, you arrive in country to execute, and you discover completely what I call day and night reality, right? So planning from when a project will start, the various stages of the project can literally derail. You can plan that this project starts and running for 3 months from, let's say, construction to midpoint completion having final project completions. You could plan a 3-month series and you realize that actually going to take you what, 6 months, because one, your supplier is dependent on an import outside of Africa. And that supply is dependent on import because that local resource is not available. So they're dependent on import. There's a delay to get the vessel or the ship into Africa. There's a delay in custom clearance. Everything can happen. And that 9-month project can easily become a 1 year, a 1.5 year project. So for me, planning, right, is one of the biggest challenge. Before COVID, we were very good at our logistics. So lead time around logistics was very okay because you had so much inflow of what you call vessels into Africa. So that wasn't a big issue. And literally every African country had an international flight or flights coming in daily. So you could literally bring in equipment by air, by sea easily. COVID brought a lot of changes to that, but we are beginning to stabilize one more time. So I will put planning number 1, logistics number 2, and then I would say investment, right? Infrastructure investment as number 3 overall. So that's how I will rate if you ask me what is the most fragile aspect of supply chain today in terms of the African market.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from David. David, you can ask directly.
All right, Madam, thank you so much can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, David. I can hear you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your question, and then also having the courage to take such a topic. So I'm in the supply chain space. With Ghana Ports and Harbour Authority. 2017, I exited. I was the main brain behind the paperless port. It used to be the e-port.
Yes.
So we tried to streamline some process, and today it is what it is. What I want to draw, it's good that you've touched on almost every aspect of the supply chain. I mean, process, collaboration, partnership, outsourcing, and all that. I just want to tap into your thoughts. You know, the whole supply chain deal, I mean, even global supply chain relies almost 60 to 70% on movement of goods through the sea.
Yes.
And given the fact that on this part of the continent, we don't even own vessels. So cargo is picked from SA, it goes to Rotterdam before it comes to Ghana.
Absolutely.
So it's expensive shipping from SA to Ghana than, for instance, shipping from US to Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, what is your thought on that, and what can we do? And this one is not on the individual companies level, but assuming if we want to affect policy, what can we do at this level to be able to drive this? Black Star Line is no more. I hear Magdan is trying to revive it.
Yeah.
If you watch the Business and Financial Times today, I myself and some guys from Center for International Maritime Affairs, Ghana, authored something about the LUMI currency, a unified currency by the African Diaspora and Central Bank. What we are trying to do is to help promote this currency, which is already in about 74 countries, among the diasporans.
Yes.
See how we can, supply chain experts, those in you are talking about building pipelines, gas pipelines. These are all huge investments, right? Without that, then we can't talk about supply chain. So I want to tap into your thoughts. What can we do? And the fact that I'm also willing to share with you the funding opportunities that we have as a continent to tap into some of these funds, so we can own our own vessels, we can own our own multi-logistics structures, so that we can decide the turnaround time of vessels, not because Next Line or Grimaldi and other guys are there dictating to us. Exactly. So let me know your thoughts on this.
Yeah, So David, thanks. And I think you in between answered most of the or mentioned some of the activities we need to do. Look, it's worrying, right, to know that a continent as big as Africa, we are so dependent on other continents that have built these resources, right, that we just rely on today. And we've kind of become so reliant and dependent on others that sometimes I don't know if we even want to take the risk to really think that what can we do and own it to ourselves as African continent. So to your point, we don't own the vessels. You want to ship an item from just, let's say, Nigeria back to Cameroon, is a land border. It's actually something, maybe if you start from the northern part of Nigeria, you drive into Cameroon, you are there in 2 hours. But the item will literally go maybe to Paris or go to Amsterdam and reroute back to Cameroon for you, maybe in a couple of weeks if you are lucky, but maybe in a month or so. So owning like a fleet that floats the waters of Africa and goes internationally and back to the waters of Africa are so important. And this comes back to my point of investment and infrastructure. We need to prioritize what is important for us, right? What is important for us in terms of investment. You cannot have a good oil and gas industry if you don't have a good pipeline system or network that connects the resources to the refineries or to the final point of processes. You cannot have a strong oil and gas industry if you cannot bring in equipment and, let me say, other resources needed for the industry easily and directly into the continent. So yes, David, it's a big ask, and there's a lot of dependency today because we've not done well in that space. We've not invested, we've not prioritized that. I feel it's not like Africa Protocol. We don't just have the resources. I think it's all about how we prioritize our resources. So some continent would say, this for me is my priority. I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not neglecting all the other sectors, but I see this to be the enabler. So it's still back to the same, what do you call it, a talk around how connected is Africa really. Are African leaders, are African business people, are African system really interested in connecting us as a continent, or we are busy dividing ourselves as individual countries? Because you talked of one currency. It's a shame that as a continent today, we have multiple currencies, all of them being devalued because we are competing against the strong currencies of the euro and the dollar versus having one strong African currency for such a big market. So if we don't interconnect our priorities, countries are interested in pursuing individual agendas, then it's going to be tough, right, with time for us to have this leverage that only make us strong because one, we are one continent. Two, our I wouldn't say our faith, but our progress are so much interdependent on each other. So David, is back to investment, back to prioritizing what infrastructure the continent really need to look into. And to your point, having one system, right? Not that we want to have one person as maybe in charge of everything, but one system that connects us, one currency, one logistics system, or at least an interconnected logistics system that serves the entire continent. So for me, if I am asked what would be like the solution or what should we do differently, I would say let's reprioritize. Let's reprioritize infrastructure and let's start to connect ourselves as one people with a shared destiny, a shared outcome than individual pursuit. Because these are very large and big investments that probably one country cannot overnight swing it, but if we put our resources together, we have a chance of making it happen.
So, just a follow-up. I was drawing your attention to the fact that there are funding options for some of these projects. So some of you who are leading leaders, I just want to bring your attention to this. If you go to the African Diaspora Central Bank, their website, I mean, you would see the Lumi currency, which is a currency adopted from the Maroons. The Maroons, if you know their history, one Queen Nania who hails from Asante region led them to defeat the British during those some 400 years ago, and they were given about 100,000 acres of land. Their currency is what the ECOSIS adopted. The ECOSIS is the diasporans who have their lineage from Africa, and they have set up their ecosystem like the ECOWAS. That is the sixth region, and what they are using the Lumi to do is to help Africa rebuild itself and pay its debt. And most of us may not have heard about it. So industry players, corporations who would want to tap into this opportunity is going to help them. And some of these funds can be used to build infrastructure, roads. I have written a paper that will be published very soon on using the Lumi currency to ship financing and then ship repair in Africa. That's my target because hey, the blue sea, the blue economy contributes almost $24 trillion. And
yes.
come on, 71% of the earth is covered by sea, right?
Absolutely.
So we would have to rethink. So I'm bringing this to your attention. You can take my number. I'm part of the team implementing the Lumi in West Africa. So we can empower businesses.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Maybe we can make the contacts later. We have Aqua Akea who has a question too.
Thank you very much. I see you were struggling with my name, Ahmed.
Equia.
Sorry, terribly sorry for saying that.
Yes, Salah, a wonderful presentation and good follow-up questions from David also. And I just want to find out, whenever we talk about supply chain resilience, supplier diversification comes up. And for me, what I've experienced is there's a lot of push when it comes to cost savings, and vendors are a bit reluctant when they realize that their level of involvement is going to be minimal. Because of the nature of investment when it comes to some of these scopes, the expectation is that they will have early involvement, but when they realize that the other vendors involved, they seem to lose interest, which I find to be very surprising. And in the past 2 years, things have changed where companies are actually, I'm in Ghana, companies are actually leaving the country. So I want to know how do we find the balance in driving diversification, also pushing supplier interests? Because sometimes you're pushing so much for your purchasing power, but you might be pushing other players out. So how do we find that balance?
Yeah. Thanks, Equia. Look, just like we are a business, the supplier is also a business, right? And business must make sense. Business must have a return. And if it doesn't make sense, suppliers are going to pull out. And that is what we are experiencing. If the business scope is so small and you over diversify as well, you literally spreading the what do you call it, the bread too thin, and nobody will really benefit. So one for me is understanding the scope, what is the volume involved, and what are the various contributors to that particular scope, right? When I look at supply diversification, I'm looking at where I don't put all my eggs in one basket. I diversify according to categories within the scope, right? So that suppliers can specialize, they can be more efficient, because when you specialize on a particular category, you are more efficient, you become so effective and efficient in a way that you can automatically reduce the final output cost, right? So when you look at, let's say you have a whole, let's take a facility, you want to run a facility, there are specialized categories within that facility. If you assume and award that to one supplier, they're going to have dependencies, because hardly will you have a company or one, let's say, group that will have the end-to-end requirement for your facility. So it's important to know what are the special services involved in each category, and who are the companies that have built both the knowledge, both the technical skills, and differentiate themselves in the market, such that one, because of their background, their knowledge, their understanding of the scope, they are already going to be competitive than somebody who is going to take the scope as a learning, let me say, ground where they can make mistakes and where they are maybe costing, their what you call input could be expensive because they don't even understand it and all that. So Equia, it's tough when you're balancing a low scope as we see in Ghana today with diversity, because you begin to spread it so thin. But if the scope is broader and you have to segment it by category, that is when your suppliers actually become interested. And one thing you realize, I know we always talk of our bargaining power. At some point, you need to trade bargaining power for quality, on-time delivery, and business continuity. If you're going to push suppliers on cost reduction, you're going to get low quality product, longer lead times, and at the end of the day, you are going to risk your project. So you need to understand what we call a should cost. What should this item cost me based on your cost builder? If you do a proper breakdown of the components involved, understand the should cost of each of them in the particular market you find yourself, you realize if you are overpaying, you are paying competitively, or you are actually underpaying. So you know where to position your supplier. So there's a lot of work to do. It's just not the job of going to tell a supplier, reduce your cost by this percentage, when you don't really understand the cost buildup the supplier is sitting with. If you do that continuously, you're going to drive them out of business, or you end up getting low quality products on a long lead time. At the end of the day, the risk sits with the company.
Thank you, Salah. Thank you, Akia, for your question. So time is almost up, and just trying to understand my own way and trying to have some thoughts. So supply chain, when well shaped, is actually an enabler for oil and gas industry in Africa. But also oil and gas can be a business ground to make the supply chain develop. I mean, to shape or to have a resilient and flexible supply chain, it costs a lot of investment, even though we do our best to prioritize the investment and have smart strategies, but it still will require a lot of investment. And oil and gas, I think, as a high value industry, could be an excellent ground to develop the supply chain. So it goes both ways. I mean, each part is enabler of the second. And in the other hand, if we can develop this supply chain in Africa, it will be the enabler for all the industry, and including the green and the green energy, let's say. So just if you have some thought on that, Salah, before giving the word to Asil for the closing words.
Ahmed, I think you summarized it better than I do, right? We do know that the oil and gas industry is one of the industries with high standards, right? Probably we are next to Eurospace, but we're doing our best, right? So we have high standards. So the point is, if we can develop resilient supply chain using the high standard expectation of oil and gas, we will have a better supply chain for the rest of the industries. So that is how it's interconnected. So oil and gas is both an enabler to supply chain, and supply chain is also an enabler to oil and gas. It's going to be a collaboration, because whatever we learn running an oil and gas business with supply chain, we can easily deploy that one to mining, to agriculture, to the finance industry, to any other industry that supply chain today is struggling, right? So yes, it is that we see the industry as growing, the opportunity to connect and make sure that we grow the industry the right way, the most competitive way, and in the timely manner that we need it for the region, and also use that opportunity to grow a resilient supply chain that can transcend across industry. So Ahmed, you summarized it much better than I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Thank you for all the clarification you brought. Thank for the audience for their questions. And I think I'm going to hand over the word to Asil Belhassan, SPA Tunis Membership Chair, to the closing words. Asil, it's up to you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you. Before we wrap up, I want to thank our speaker, Salah, for the insightful presentation. And I would like to extend a special thanks to you, Ahmed, for your contribution, and to all the attendees for their active participation. If you allow me to introduce the SPE Tunis section briefly, which is a newly relaunched section comprising professionals and students in the oil and gas sector. We are dedicated to collaboration, knowledge exchange, and supporting our members' professional growth. I would like to take the opportunity to mention that we have an upcoming in-person event, which is the SPE Town Hall, SPE Tunis Section Town Hall, where we will meet and discuss strategies and knowledges to shape our annual goals. Also, a big thank you to the SPE Ghana section for the invitation and collaboration. We look forward to more opportunities to work together in the future, especially that we have the second edition of the IEH conference, which encompasses various aspects of the energy sector across all African continents, and that will be a good opportunity to collaborate and maybe to see you in person. So stay tuned for to our LinkedIn pages and to our social media channels. Thank you all for your participation. Up to you, Sheena.
Sheena, do you have any closing word you want to add?
Yes, we have some upcoming programs, but I'll let our program chair, James, handle that. James?
Just by way of a reminder, on the 21st of February, we are hosting our workshop for the young professionals. We do a quarterly workshop every quarter for young professionals as well as programs. So for this quarter, we are hosting a YP workshop where we have various distinguished speakers that will be speaking to our young professionals. Then on the 7th of March, we are also hosting a distinguished lecturer from the US of A who will be in Ghana in person. The venue, as usual, is the Petroleum Commission Ghana, so please do join us. And then the biggest of all summits and workshops in Ghana will be held in May, where we are hosting the rest of the continent in Accra, Ghana. Please, if you've not seen it, please visit our LinkedIn pages, our various social media pages to know the dates. It is on the 19th to the 21st of May 2024, where we are hosting the rest of Africa in Accra, Ghana. Thank you very much, Sheena. Then I'll hand over to the moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you, China. Thank you, Asil. Thank you very much, Salah. It was a very interesting and very enrichful presentation. Thank you, Ghana section, Tunis section. I think this subject, of course, it could require more time, but let's keep it in as the plan. And thank you, everybody. And I think that's it. So see you in the next workshop for the Ghana section and for the next meetings for Tunis section. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, SPE team. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, so.
Have a good one, guys. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.